Each and every year, he writes the definitive gold standard for college football preview magazines. We bring in Phil Steele of Phil Steele's College Football Preview to talk some college football with August camp just a couple months away. Phil, thanks so much for joining us.
Real pleasure, Mark.
Yeah, definitely. If you can give us an idea, because I know for me, each and every June, sometime in the last week of June, it's a must-have, got to get for hardcore college football fans and analysts to get out there, get your magazine. And for me, I take it on vacation. I take it all over the place. During the season even, it's not just a preview guide. You know, you can keep it on the coffee table. You want a quick reference. I want to know who plays guard for Wake Forest while I'm watching them play Duke. It's really a great guide throughout the season. Can you give us an idea of the exhaustive work that goes into this thing?
Sure thing. And you're right. I think people use the magazine not only in August, September, October, November, December, all the way through January. Now, I actually start working on the magazine the Sunday after Thanksgiving. And what I do is I do 3 write-throughs for each team. The first write-through, I go through every single article that's written about the team for the season. I do the teams whose season is complete at that point and get the first write-through. The second is the pre-spring write-through when we get it from the schools. Maybe there's some transfers. You factor in the freshman classes. The third one is post-spring, which is after spring is over. I watch all the spring games that are on TV, read about all the spring games, etc. Now, I personally put about 2,000 hours into the magazine. I work about an average of 77 hours a week during magazine season, which is 6 months. And then I have a staff of 15 to 20 people that put in about 10,000 hours helping prep the team pages for me and then proofing them. So when you get a stat in a Phil Steele magazine, it's about 99.4% accurate. You can rely on it.
99.4. I would wish a lot of things in life were that accurate, but it's obviously a secret formula kind of combined with a ton of hard work. All right, let's talk about the college football playoff. A lot of critics of the BCS, the playoff as well, over the last few years. My issue is we've got 5 conferences trying to fit into 4 slots. We know what the mess was in 2014, and Ohio State kind of validated the selection. 2015, it was pretty cut and dry, but obviously a game or two could have thrown it into a frenzy. Notre Dame, had they beaten Clemson or a Stanford, and obviously an ACC championship game upset would have thrown it into a chaotic situation as well. Your thoughts about the playoff and whether you agree or should it be expanded?
Well, I'm a little partial here, Mark. About 15 years ago or 12 years ago, I started writing an article in the magazine, which was we need to get rid of the BCS and we need to have a 4-team playoff. We need to have number 1 play number 4, number 2 against number 3. And I said, this is the perfect scenario. I don't want to see an 18 playoff. I don't want to see a 16-team playoff where it becomes a battle of attrition and those teams that remain the healthiest end up winning the title, like in the FCS. We saw that in 2 out of 3 years. They had a 16-team playoff. The third-place team in a division in the Colonial Conference was playing for the championship game. I don't want to see that. I want to see the best 4 teams out there on the field. So I wrote about 1 against 4, 2 against 3. It finally came to fruition 2 years ago. I'm a big proponent of the 4-team playoff.
All right. I think we've got an argument in our future, possibly with an 18 playoff, because I think that's the way to go. But I would have to come extremely prepared for that debate. All right. Let's look around college football, Phil, because I see a number of intriguing teams, not necessarily the best teams in those specific conferences. But I look to the ACC, and with Mark Richt coming in, Al Golden out, and with a number of top 15 recruiting classes already in place there, that's been the most talented team in that division for a number of years, and they just can't get it done. Somebody like Georgia Tech jumps up. Your thoughts about the Canes this year?
This is the year I think they get it done. And I'm going to give you numerous reasons here. First of all, last year I had Miami of Florida, my number 1 most improved team in the country. And I also had Al Golden on my hot seat list. And I said, if they don't play up to their talent level, Golden will be out of a job. And that's exactly what happened. They have a lot of talent. In fact, when I talked to a lot of NFL guys, your number 2 quarterback for this year's draft is Brad Kaya. And Kaya is a guy that really could have that potential to be one of the top players picked in this 2017 draft. Overall talent, Miami's got 14 returning starters, a bevy of experience on the defensive front 7, a lot of those VHTs. And then when Mark Richt was at Georgia, he's a guy that was there 15 years. He sort of got a little stale. Yeah, he won 10 games again this year. He won 10 games again this year. We want national titles. Let's get rid of Mark. Well, now if he comes into Miami of Florida and wins 10 games, they're going to treat him like a king, which they should. And I think when you look at the Coastal Division, It's a very winnable division this year. Miami's got the most talent. They've got a head coach that knows how to get it done. And I think with that new person coming in and saying, this is how we get it done, and with the record that he's had in the SEC, I believe Mark Richt gets it done this year. So I have them playing in the ACC title game.
Yeah, after the 58-0 shellacking against Clemson, it looked like the train was going to come off the wheels completely. Golden gets fired, but those kids showed a lot of resolve in salvaging that season. Probably have to keep Kaya upright a little bit more, so the offensive line key this year. I go to the SEC with Butch Jones racking up top 5 recruiting classes a couple years in a row. It seems like Tennessee, like despite the criticism of all the close losses last year, that they are just on the cusp of exploding.
I'm in agreement with that. And in fact, when you look at Tennessee this year, I see a team that is the most experienced team in the FBS among the Power 5 conferences. They're my number 3 most experienced team, 17 returning starters coming back, and the most experienced of all the Power 5 teams. Now, for years, Butch Jones, since he's got there, has said, we're young, we're young, we're young. He cannot play that card this year. They've got a veteran quarterback in Joshua Dobbs. They've got 3 players on the defense. Derek Barnett at the defensive end, Jalen Reeves-Maben at linebacker, and then Cam Sutton at cornerback. These are all potential first-round draft picks. When I'm talking to the NFL guys, that's what they were telling me about the Bulls defense. Now, offensively, the offensive line's got to get better. And you look last year, they've got 2 incredible running backs in Hurd and Kamara, but they only average about 4.5, 4.6 yards per carry. And I point at the offensive line a little bit there, but now it's a veteran offensive line as well. Last year, they lost 4 games, but you changed just 4 plays in those games, and they were a 13-0 team. They led Oklahoma by double digits. They led Florida by double digits. They had a 5-point loss to Arkansas, or a 4-point loss, and a 4 or 5-point loss to Alabama. 1 play, all 4 games. They're 13-0 last year. They need to get it done. Now, they do get Alabama at home, which is big. That's a big game during the season, but they're my pick to win the East. And basically, if you win the SEC East, you find yourself in the SEC title game, and you're 1 game away from making the playoffs, because I don't think the SEC champ doesn't make the playoffs. So this is Butch Jones's year to get it done.
Yeah, the Vols with the late lead at Tuscaloosa before Alabama decided to give Derrick Henry the ball 7 or 8 straight times on a late drive there and pull out the win. Ohio State, Urban Meyer had it rolling last year, fell at Michigan State or at home against Michigan State in a very just chaotic kind of game where it was a bit lackluster on offense. They lose all that talent to the NFL, but I think it's personally, Phil, I think it's crazy that Vegas has them at an 8.5 over under. I just don't see where the losses are coming from. I know that the talent's going to be young, but when they go to Oklahoma, they've got 2 games under their belts at that point. I think they're going to be a little bit better than expected.
I'm in agreement with you 100% there, Mark. 8.5 is silly. Now, the Oklahoma game, I do expect them to lose that game. First road game, young team, 3 returning starters on offense, 3 returning starters on defense, taking on a veteran Oklahoma team, one that's only lost 5 or 6 games at home in the last 10 years. I think that's a game where Ohio State loses it. But their most important games of the season are at Michigan State and home against Michigan. And both those games are week 11 and week 12. Now, when you enter a season, you're a young team. But by the time you get to week 11 of a season, you're a veteran team. Let's face it, you've got 10 starts under your belt. If the season was to end after week 12, you'd call them veterans the next year. That's a veteran group. So they're playing Michigan State and Michigan exactly where you want. Now, Urban Meyer's lost a grand total of 1 regular season game in the Big Ten in 4 years. That's a remarkable record. And the talent he's got there has been the top recruiting class in the Big Ten each and every year. There's no denying the talent Ohio State has on the offensive line, defensive line, linebacker. Raekwon McMillan's a top inside linebacker for the draft. Defensive backs across the board. This team is talented. They'll be experienced for the biggest games. And that's why they're my pick to win their division in the Big Ten. And let's face it, whoever you pick to win the Big Ten East is going to be your pick to win the Big Ten. So I think the Buckeyes can survive the inexperience and find themselves back in the Big Ten title game this year.
Yeah, Michigan, the chic pick at this point for a number of reasons across the country. Phil, we move to the Big 12, and you've got this formula that crunches all the numbers, looks at the track record, and then projects based on who's coming back and so forth and who's lost. How in the world do you account for a situation like Baylor and what effect that's going to have on the Bears?
Well, the beautiful thing, Mark, about putting the magazine out as late as I do, and I hold on to it till, you see, what I talk to the coaches all the time, and they say, hey, in the month of May, that's when I have our exit meetings with the players, and you end up with a lot of transfers. So if you put out your magazine at the end of April, you're missing out on a lot of the transfers. So we caught all those by sending out the magazine on June the 2nd. But the big one we caught was Baylor not having their head coach. In fact, if you flip over my Baylor page in the magazine, it says Jim Grove head coach. And that's one of the advantages to coming out late like we do. Now, with Baylor, I will tell you this. I had Baylor a potential top 10 team. I had Baylor finishing second in the Big 12. But when the news came down, and then I started seeing some attrition. There are 7 incoming freshmen that are not going to enroll at Baylor. One of them had already been there, and he's not coming back. They had 2 JUCOs that were supposed to come in, one on the offensive line, one on the defensive line. They're gone. I knocked Baylor down a notch or 2, and so I don't have them pick second in the Big 12 anymore. I don't have them in the top 10, and I think this is major for Baylor. Art Briles is a head coach that doesn't even use a playbook. He's just out there you calling plays, and granted, his son's still there as the offensive coordinator. Let's face it, Art Briles is the mastermind of that team. I think there'll be a different team with Jim Grove as the head coach. They still have talent. They still have the talent to finish near the top of the Big 12, but I didn't pick up second this year because of everything that happened.
All right, Phil Steele from the Phil Steele College Football Preview each and every year. Got to have that on the coffee table for the entirety of the college football season joining us. Let's head to the Pac-12 real quick, Phil. If we look at UCLA, this is a program that intrigues me because prior to Jim Mora, when they were winning 4 or 5 or 6 games a year, I always thought, how does that happen for a school that's in a prime locale with all that recruiting base, with the allure of the weather and a number of other niceties we could probably point to at UCLA. Mora comes in, instant impact. He treats it like an NFL team, gets those guys to work, but it looks like they've plateaued in recent years. Your thoughts about UCLA?
Well, last year in my magazine, after talking to Coach Moore in the spring, I always put my star. I have a certain players where I put a star and a circle around their name. And on the defensive side of the ball, I had 3 such players. Well, guess what? All 3 players were gone. They lost their starting cornerback prior to the season due to a transfer. Eddie Vanderdoes up front got injured. Miles Jack, their linebacker, out. So they took away a big chunk of that defense that UCLA had due to injuries and or people leaving the program. I think they're going to be in better shape on the defensive side, and they're not going to allow the 400-plus yards like they did last year. Now, offensively, they're changing the style of play. Josh Rosen's going to be taking a lot of snaps from center, shifting to a little bit more of a pro style. They do lose some key players, but I like what they have left on offense. And I think Josh Rosen, when he comes out, will be the first player picked in the NFL overall in 2018. Now, when you compare UCLA and USC side by side, talent-wise, they're close. I might even give a slight edge to USC. But USC is a much tougher schedule this year. Out of the North, they draw Oregon, Stanford, Washington. I think UCLA only plays one of those teams. UCLA gets a lot of key games at home, including that big game against USC. So the schedule, even though they're close, has me clearly favoring UCLA to actually win the Pac-12 South this year, something they came very close to last season.
Yeah, when you're checking out and trying to make predictions, got to look at those crossover games, especially in the huge conferences, those 14-teamers in the ACC, the Big Ten, and the SEC, because that could make all the difference. I'm going to throw one wild card at you, Phil. It's Houston. They've got the matchup against Oklahoma. We saw what they were capable against the Florida State team that probably not necessarily on their game, but still Florida State, still top 10 talent. Your thoughts about the Cougars?
Yeah, not only was Florida State not on their game, but Sean McGuire injured his ankle early in the game. It was amazing. When I talked to Coach Fisher this spring, he said it was amazing that McGuire even came back in the game like he did, but he was nowhere near as effective. So it was clearly Houston playing an A game. But I think Houston's got the potential to crack the playoffs this year if everything was to go well. Now, I didn't call for it, but I'm saying the potential is there, and let me explain how. First of all, Tom Herman's one of the great offensive minds out there. Look what he did at Ohio State 2 years ago. Look at the drop-off at Ohio State without Tom Herman. Even though they had a veteran offense with 3 quarterbacks with experience, there's a big drop-off statistically. Well, at Houston, a big improvement. Despite the fact it was his first year, Greg Ward Jr. looked great. Greg Ward Jr. is back this year at the quarterback spot. Duke Cannelon is back is added in at running back. He's a Texas transfer. When I talked to Coach Herman, he's got high expectations. If everything works out well, he could be one of the star players in the AAC. And defensively, there are 6 possible all-conference players in their defensive front 7. This is a team, when I talked to Coach Herman last year, he liked the first team. He did not like the second and third team. They didn't have a lot of depth. This year, they've got better depth. They go too deep at most positions because he's had 2 pretty good recruiting classes. Then you factor in the schedule. Most of their road games fall into the winnable category. The one biggest game of their season is that Oklahoma game in the opener. And here's the scenario where they can make the playoffs. Let's say they upset Oklahoma in the opener and run the table impressively, which you're capable of doing. Now, let's say Oklahoma wins the Big 12 with that one big loss. Who are you going to pick, Oklahoma or Houston? You're going to pick Houston over Oklahoma. That means they just need another couple of Power 5 conferences to have 2 losses, and Houston could sneak its way into the playoffs. But I think they have to be your favorite, at least for the Group of 5 top bid, but don't discount that playoff chance.
And it sure wouldn't hurt if Louisville turned out to be a solid 9-win team when Houston and Louisville get together near the end of November in a key matchup that's kind of off the radar to a certain extent. All right, college football expert Phil Steele, before we let you go, Phil, the most important question I'm going to ask for everybody out there is, how do we get a hold of the magazine? Because for me, I got to have the magazine, but I know you've got it available in a number of platforms now.
Well, I appreciate that, Mark. Now, it hits the newsstands June the 28th. And, Mark, you pick up a magazine at the newsstands, you can compare it to every other one. It's heavier, it's about twice the size, and it's about 4 times as amount of information because the pages are very little white space, no ads. It's just information on top of information. But if you don't want to wait till June the 28th to get your magazine, the truck just pulled up today. You can actually get the magazine shipped out through our offices. Give us a call at 866-918-7711. That's 866-918-7711. We'll ship it out to you the second you order it. We'll get it out in the mail, and you'll have it in 2 to 3 days, a good 10 days ahead of where it hits the newsstands. Or you can go to the website, which is philsteele.com. Now, if you can't wait that long, you can actually download it to your iPad or iPhone through the Apple Store or your Android device through Google Play, and it's very easy to use on your iPad or iPhone. I'm not a guy that uses iPad or iPhone a lot like you, Mark. I'm a guy that likes to have the magazine in front of me, but I can even operate it without asking my 10-year-old daughter for assistance in navigating the pages. So it's pretty easy to use. So any of those methods, you can get the magazine in your hands.
And I can attest to that process because for 6 years, I was a sports director in Mississippi at a CBS station, wanted the Big Ten cover, though. So I would have to order it and especially order the Big Ten version, which was very nice as well. Phil Steele of Phil Steele's college football preview that comes out every year, late June. Got to get that thing if you're a college football fan. Phil, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
A lot of fun talking football with you today, Mark. Have a great summer.